the reflection room. The rain had begun hours before Ava arrived in Morrow Creek, tapping steadily against the windshield of her aging Subaru like skeletal fingers, persistent and cold. Trees lined both sides of the narrow road, their gnarled branches reaching across the asphalt, weaving shadows in her high beams like black veins. Morrow Creek wasn't on any modern maps. The town had once flourished in the 1800s, built on mining and timber, but the industries collapsed decades ago. Now it was little more than a cluster of sagging buildings, overgrown paths, and folklore, whispers carried through time like old sins. Ava was used to places like this. As an investigative journalist with a special focus on paranormal lore, she'd wandered into plenty of forgotten towns chasing ghost stories and urban myths. Her followers online had grown into the thousands, and Hollowmere Estate, the mansion at the center of Morrow Creek's whispered legend, was her next big feature. She pulled into the town's only gas station, a single pump beside a weather-beaten wooden building that leaned a little too far left, as if trying to whisper secrets into the forest. The open sign flickered. The store itself looked like it hadn't seen a renovation or a broom since the Nixon administration. She stepped out into the misty rain and entered. A dull bell rang above the door. Inside it smelled like tobacco, gasoline, and something faintly metallic. An old man sat behind the counter, white beard hanging to his chest, skin a mosaic of sun damage and time. His cloudy blue eyes lifted and studied her. "You lost?" he asked. "No," Ava replied, forcing a smile. "Looking for Hollowmere Estate." The old man didn't blink. "You a cop?" She raised an eyebrow. "Journalist." "Worse," he muttered. He reached under the counter, pulled out a battered pack of cigarettes, and tapped one free with fingers stained yellow. "I'm doing a piece on haunted locations. Local folklore, that kind of thing." He lit the cigarette and inhaled deeply. "Hollowmere isn't folklore." Ava leaned on the counter. "So what is it?" The old man met her gaze. His eyes were no longer tired, they were hard, haunted. "It's a door. And once it opens for you, it don't close." She chuckled nervously. "That's dramatic. Then stay away. Write about some other place. I've already got the footage planned. Got a drone, cameras, infrared. I'll be fine." He leaned forward. "There's a room in that house. All mirrors. You step inside, and something steps out." VA grabbed a coffee from the fridge and placed a $10 bill on the counter. "Thanks for the warning." As she walked back to her car, she couldn't help but glance into the glass window. For just a second, barely a blink, her reflection lagged behind. Ava's GPS had long since stopped functioning. The blue arrow on the screen hovered in place while the real world continued to move. She turned it off and relied on the old directions she'd written in her notebook from an online forum. "Past the covered bridge. Turn left where the mailbox is covered in moss. Keep going until the road disappears into the woods." The covered bridge groaned beneath the weight of her car, its ancient timbers creaking like something living. She paused for a moment halfway across. Below, a slow-moving river wound through jagged rocks and trees, dark and glassy in the moonlight. It looked almost like oil. Ava rolled down her window. A breeze pushed in, damp, cold, and carrying a smell she couldn't place. Earth maybe. Or decay. As she crossed, something darted across the road up ahead. She slammed on the brakes. The shape was gone before her eyes could focus, but it was humanoid. Too fast. Too silent. Her heartbeat quickened, but she kept driving. She told herself it was probably a deer or a raccoon, even though her gut twisted with unease. After another mile, she found the mossy mailbox just as described. The road beyond it narrowed into a muddy path, barely visible in the fog, lined with dying trees. Branches scraped the roof of her car, sometimes screeching like nails on a chalkboard. Her high beams only made the mist ahead seem thicker, like a curtain she was pushing through. Eventually, the path opened into a clearing, and there it was. Hollowmere Estate. It rose out of the earth like a tombstone. 3 stories tall, choked in ivy and shadow, the mansion was a corpse of architecture. Windows broken or boarded, walls sagging under time's weight, the once grand double doors hanging open by rusted hinges. Ava parked and stepped out, the silence pressing against her. Not even birds chirped. No wind rustled the trees. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. She pulled her jacket tight and grabbed her gear. Camera, flashlight, voice recorder, backup battery. She kept a small iron pendant in her pocket, a gift from a Roma woman she once interviewed. Ava didn't believe in protection charms, but lately she'd started carrying it anyway, just in case. As she walked toward the mansion, the mud sucked at her boots like it wanted her to stay. Just before reaching the porch, she paused to film her introduction. April 12, 10:36 p.m. Ava Rowe, investigative journalist. I've arrived at Hollow Mere Estate in Morrow Creek. This house has been abandoned for nearly 70 years. Locals claim it's haunted. Some believe it's cursed. Tonight, I'm going inside, and I'm going to find out why. She lowered the camera. Behind her, the woods shifted, barely a sound but enough to make her glance back. Nothing. Just trees. Just fog. But in the reflection of the car's side window, something tall and motionless stood at the edge of the forest, watching. When she turned around again, it was gone. The porch groaned beneath Ava's boots as she approached the front doors of Hollow Mere. The boards were warped, some split down the middle, and a deep layer of green moss coated the steps. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating flaking paint and old claw marks across the doorway, like someone or something had tried to get out. She hesitated only for a second. Then she stepped through. The interior was colder than outside, as though the house itself exhaled frost. The air smelled of mildew, wet wood, and something faintly metallic. Again that strange coppery scent she'd noticed on the bridge. Ava swept her flashlight slowly across the foyer. To the left, a massive, dust-covered staircase spiraled up into darkness. Half the balusters were broken and spiderwebs hung like lace. To the right, a hallway lined with doorways, each leading to unknown rooms buried in shadow. Straight ahead, past a crumbling chandelier and a collapsed side table, sat a grand set of double doors, almost like an entrance to a ballroom. Her gut twisted the moment her light landed on them. The handles were polished, untouched, unlike the decay around them. She flipped on her camera again. "Inside Hollow Mere now," she whispered. "There's decay everywhere except for one set of doors ahead of me. Looks pristine, which makes no sense." She moved cautiously, her every step kicking up puffs of dust and crumbling wood. She reached the doors and rested her hand on the right knob. It was cold. Too cold. Her breath misted. She opened it. The room beyond was massive and silent, and perfectly intact. Ava froze in the doorway, her brain struggling to process what she saw. Every surface, walls, floor, ceiling, was covered in mirrors. Tall, seamless panels that reflected endless angles of her and the room. She stepped in slowly, her boots clicking on the flawless floor. Not a speck of dust. No cobwebs. No signs of aging or wear. It looked new. Her reflection stared back at her from every angle, dozens of Avas moving with her, tilting their heads, raising their hands. She turned to look at the back of the door, and her stomach dropped. The entryway was gone. In its place, only more mirrors. Ava walked back, pressing her hands against the surface. It was solid, cool, and smooth. Her flashlight reflected infinitely. She turned again, slowly, realizing she was standing in a perfect cube of mirrors, like being inside a diamond. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. One of her reflections didn't move. She blinked. It blinked late. Ava froze. Her flashlight trembled slightly in her hand, the beam flickering as it passed over her many mirrored selves. Dozens of her stared back, but one still held her eye. The one in the far right corner of the mirrored cube. It blinked again half a second late. Then it smiled. She did not. Her breath caught in her throat. She took a cautious step toward the strange reflection, her boots echoing off the glass like footsteps in a cathedral. Her doppelganger mirrored her movement, this time perfectly. No delay. No smile. She frowned. The reflection frowned. She turned her head sharply. So did it. The grin was gone, as though it had never been there. She stepped back toward the center of the room, turning in a slow circle. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "This place is wrong," she said aloud, activating her voice recorder and lifting it to her lips. "There's something going on with the reflections. One of them moved late, smiled when I didn't." She waited to play back the recording. At first, just her voice. Then, something else. A second voice layered under hers, low, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come." She dropped the recorder. The sound of it hitting the mirrored floor echoed like a scream. As she reached down to pick it up, she noticed something else in the reflection below her. A shadow. Not hers. It passed behind her, slow, deliberate. She stood upright in a flash and spun around. Nothing. All reflections were still. All showed only her. She stared at them for a moment longer, holding her breath. Her instinct screamed to run, but run where? The door was gone. The room was sealed. And now, somewhere deep in the distance, she thought she heard the faintest noise. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Ava turned slowly. In the corner panel, the one where her reflection had blinked late, something else was there now. Not her. Not quite. It was her shape, her height. But the face was just wrong. The eyes too wide, the skin too smooth, the smile too wide. It stood completely still until she blinked. Then it raised one hand and waved. Ava stared at the waving reflection, her skin crawling with 1,000 invisible bugs. That thing inside the mirror, her double, lowered its hand slowly, the smile never leaving its face. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. She leaned in, closer. The words were silent but unmistakable. "Let me out." She stumbled backward, heart pounding, breath ragged. Every reflection now mirrored her panic, except for that one. That one still smiled, still mouthed the same words, still watched her like prey. She reached for her camera again, desperate to capture this moment. She hit record, but the screen turned to static almost immediately. White noise hissed in her ears. Then a click, the sound of a light switch. She hadn't touched anything. The ceiling above her, also mirrored, flickered to life with rows of antique bulbs embedded in the glass. The room lit up slowly, casting warm golden light across her reflections. And now something else became clear. Behind her, behind the reflections, figures. Not people exactly, shadows, tall and still, with stretched proportions and heads tilted just slightly too far to one side. They lined the mirrored walls like paintings come to life, faintly etched into the silver backing, like ghosts pressed into glass. She turned, but they weren't there in the room with her, only in the mirrors. Her hands shook as she lifted the voice recorder again. There are things in the mirrors, dozens of them. Not just me, not just that other Ava. I don't know if they're reflections or... She stopped. The figures moved, not in unison, not like illusions. One of them, a tall one with a slumped neck, slowly turned its head, bones cracking in the silence. It looked right at her. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again, louder now, not distant, directly in front of her. She followed the sound to the floor. The mirrored tiles were flawless except for one, now cracked in a perfect spiderweb pattern. From the center of that crack, something dark began to ooze. It was thick, black, viscous, moved. Ava stumbled back again, horrified, as the ooze traced symbols onto the glass. Some kind of script, angular and ancient looking. It stopped. A bubble surfaced in the liquid, then burst. Whispers flooded the room like wind through dead leaves. She watches. She waits. She feeds. You are inside now. The smiling Ava in the far mirror stepped forward, pressed her hands to the glass. She mimed knocking. 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The mirrored version of Ava didn't stop tapping. Her grin widened, the corners of her mouth splitting too far, too unnaturally. Her teeth looked sharper now, longer. Too many of them. Tap, tap, tap. Each knock sent a ripple through the mirrored surface, like water disturbed by a stone. The room felt like it was breathing, no pulsing, as if the walls had veins beneath the glass. Ava's instinct screamed louder now. Run even if there was nowhere to go. Break the mirror even if it meant 7 years of something worse than bad luck. She stepped back toward the cracked tile, the one bleeding black ichor. The symbols it had drawn had hardened, etched into the floor, glowing faintly red. Her flashlight sputtered and died, and the ceiling bulbs above began to dim one by one, as though something was draining the light itself. Suddenly, a deep, hollow knock came, not from the reflection, but from behind her. She spun. No one. But one of the mirrored panels, the one directly to her left, was now shattered, a single jagged hole in its center like a gunshot wound. Her reflection in that mirror was gone. She approached slowly, breath shallow. On the other side of the broken mirror was not her own reflection. It was dark, like a void. A swirling shadow with fingers brushing the inside edges of the glass, trying to pull itself through. She backed away, whispering to herself, "This isn't real. This isn't real." And then click, the sound like an old slide projector. The room changed. Just like that, she was no longer alone. The other Ava, the one that had been smiling in the mirror, now stood inside the room. Not in the reflection. Real. Tangible. Alive, or something like it. And she looked perfect. Hair smooth. Clothes unwrinkled. Skin flawless like porcelain. She was the idealized version of Ava. But her eyes, too wide, too white. Void of soul. Ava took a step back. The other Ava stepped forward. They mirrored no longer. "You wanted the truth," it said in Ava's voice. "You came looking for the story." She couldn't move, could barely breathe. "You brought your lights, your cameras, your questions. You stared into the dark and begged it to look back. The creature smiled again. Well, it said, tilting its head, now it sees you. And then all the mirrors, every one of them, began to ripple. Dozens of shapes emerged from within. Long limbs, distorted faces, mouths where eyes should be. Crawling, slithering, dragging themselves out of the reflections with wet, sucking sounds. The room was no longer quiet. It was hungry. Ava stumbled backward, almost tripping over her own feet. Her eyes darted from one mirror to the next, but no matter where she turned, the creatures were there, coming out. The long, twisted limbs pressed against the glass, scraping against the smooth surface like claws on metal. Their faces stretched into grotesque smiles, mouths opening wider than humanly possible, as though they were starving. Ava's breath came in shallow gasps. She couldn't think. She couldn't move. And then the first of the creatures stepped through the mirror. It was tall, too tall, and its body was a sickly shade of gray like rotting flesh. It stood impossibly still for a moment, its head tilting unnaturally as it studied her. Its eyes were hollow, black voids, and the smile it wore looked like it had been carved into its face with a dull knife. It was waiting. Ava's hands trembled as she grabbed for her camera. It was still recording. The screen flickered as she raised it, her hands shaking violently. What are you?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. The creature's smile grew wider, impossibly wide, until it stretched across its face like a sickening mask. Its lips peeled back, revealing rows upon rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "We are the reflection," it said in a voice that didn't quite sound like anything human. It was hollow, empty. A noise made from somewhere deep beneath the earth. And then, without another word, the creature lunged. Ava screamed, instinctively reaching for anything to defend herself, but the creature's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with terrifying strength. The skin was cold, too cold, and slick like oil. It dragged her toward the nearest mirror, where she could see more of the creatures crawling out, filling the space. Panic surged through her body. She kicked, screamed, scratched at its hand, but it only tightened its grip. The creatures circled around her, closing in, their movements jerky and unnatural as though they were still half trapped in the glass. The other Ava, her double, watched from the farthest corner of the room, smiling. Its eyes glimmered with a cold satisfaction. Suddenly, the creature jerked its head toward the corner where the mirror had shattered, where the shadowed figure had once been. Another sound, deeper this time, filled the air, like a growl, low and guttural. The shadows in the mirror began to writhe, contorting as if something bigger was trying to push its way through. "We cannot be contained," the creature hissed. "Not for long." Ava fought harder, desperate now. Her wrist burned where the creature's fingers touched her, cold seeping into her skin like frostbite. She grabbed the closest shard of broken glass from the floor and plunged it into the creature's hand. The thing screeched in pain, releasing her with a horrific, wet sound. Ava yanked her arm back and sprinted toward the only door she could see, the one she thought she had come through. But when she reached it, the door was gone. There was no exit, just the endless reflections. The creatures, the room of glass. The air thickened as the creatures closed in. Their breaths, if they could breathe, whistled in the dead air, their empty eyes never leaving her. Ava's chest heaved with panic, but she forced herself to think. She had one option. She had to break the mirror. But could she? Would she survive it? Ava's mind raced. The creatures closed in, their movements jerky, unnatural, hungry. Their mouths dripped with saliva, and their hollow eyes followed her every move, but still they waited. It was a trap, she realized. They weren't in a hurry. They wanted her to make the first move, to break, to give in. A cold shiver ran down her spine as the dark shadow in the shattered mirror twisted again, slithering closer to the edge of the glass. The reflection of it seemed to ripple, its shape blurring as if it wasn't quite willing to show itself entirely. Her throat tightened. The mirror behind her was no longer her own reflection, but a door, a distorted doorway leading into a new, darker space. She turned back to the creatures who had begun to advance. Their jagged teeth gleamed, their fingers long and cruel. One of them reached out toward her, its fingers twisting, stretching as it crawled toward her like something that was still trying to learn how to exist in the real world. Ava's eyes darted around. She needed to think. She had to do something, anything, to escape. Then a thought, the broken mirror, the one that had been cracked in the center. The creature released a hiss like it was feeding off her fear, and that was all it took. Ava didn't hesitate. She ran toward the cracked panel, pulling the shards of glass from the floor, her hands trembling but determined. She had no other choice. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ran, the creature still trailing behind her. They were faster than they had been before. In the room, it was changing. The shadows deepened. The walls of mirrors grew closer, like the glass was closing in around her. The crack in the mirror wasn't just a crack. It was an opening. The instant she threw herself at it, everything around her shifted. The air grew thick with a foul stench, like burning rubber mixed with something rotten. The mirror stretched, pulling her in, and she felt herself being sucked forward. The world around her twisted as she passed through the broken glass, her body stretching and distorting in a way that didn't feel possible. The world went black, and then light. A different room. Ava collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. She blinked, dazed, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She was in a dark, circular room, its walls covered in smooth, reflective glass. The air here was alive, pulsing with a low hum, like it had been waiting for her. The room seemed to stretch infinitely, but the only thing that caught her attention was a single mirror in the center. Not a reflection. A doorway. A warped glass frame that seemed to lead somewhere else entirely. And the voice that whispered now in the back of her mind wasn't her own. "You cannot leave," it said. "Not now. Not after you've seen." Her hands trembled, her body weak from the cold. She had made it out, but she could still feel them. The creatures. The whispers. She had crossed through the broken mirror, but the room was still alive. The door was still open. But now it wasn't just the reflection that was hungry. Ava's heart thudded in her chest as she pulled herself to her feet. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and the humming of the room seemed to get louder with each passing second. The walls, though smooth and reflective, pulsed with a strange energy, like the glass was alive, watching her. The voice in her mind, it wasn't hers, but it was close, too close, slithered beneath her thoughts, wrapping around them like an icy chain. "You cannot leave," it whispered again, echoing inside her skull. She staggered toward the warped mirror in the center of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. It was the only thing here, the only thing that mattered. A distorted portal, a gateway that pulsed with a sickly light. The air around it shimmered with an oily sheen, like the surface of a stagnant pond. Ava's hand reached out, trembling, but she paused just before touching the mirror. The air felt wrong, like something on the other side was pushing against her, something waiting for her to make the first move. The voice came again, clearer this time. "There is no escape," it murmured. "We are all reflections, and the glass never lies. You are already inside. We are already inside you." The words shifted. Suddenly, there was no longer just one voice. No, it was a chorus of them, all layered on top of each other, a cacophony of whispers, mocking and taunting. "We are the reflection," they sang. "We are the watcher, the keeper, the hunger, the one who sees you." Ava's knees buckled beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, dizzy, nauseous, as the world around her spun. The glass walls seemed to stretch farther and farther, closing in until she felt like she was standing in a tiny box. Her reflection didn't just stare back at her, it watched her. It was watching her every movement, anticipating her every breath. She looked down at the floor beneath her, the smooth glass now cracked in places, spreading like a web. The cracks grew longer, wider, spreading toward the center where the warped mirror stood. The glass was breaking. Ava's pulse quickened. The reflection of her, distorted by the cracks, grinned at her from across the room. That same smile from before, the one that wasn't hers but was. The one that knew something she didn't. She stood, moving toward the mirror again as if her body wasn't entirely her own. There was a compulsion, a pull. She felt like she had to touch it. She had to cross through. Had to escape. But when her fingers brushed the glass, the mirror didn't shatter. Instead it opened. A horrible, gaping hole appeared in the center of the glass, dark and bottomless. A swirling mass of shadows, like the very essence of the mirror, was now spilling through. Ava's reflection stepped forward, but it wasn't hers anymore. It was something else. The thing that had been watching her. "You're not alone anymore," it whispered. Ava recoiled, falling back against the wall, her mind reeling. Her reflection, that thing, was now alive, stepping through the hole in the mirror, its limbs stretching and distorting unnaturally as it crossed the threshold. And the room began to shift. The walls buckled inward, the reflective glass warping and twisting as the world around her bent. Ava looked back at the doorway, but it was gone. The mirror had consumed it, devoured the space behind her, leaving her in an endless void. And the thing was getting closer. She tried to run, but the floor beneath her cracked open, swallowing her feet. She couldn't move. She was trapped. The voice echoed in her head again, louder now, urgent. "You can never escape. There is no outside." The thing stepped forward, its fingers long and bent, curling toward her. It smiled. Ava's breath came in desperate gasps, the sound ragged in her throat. The air around her grew thick with something wrong. The walls of the room seemed to melt and shift like liquid glass, twisting in on themselves. The mirror's dark hole stretched wider, devouring the space around her. It was pulling her in slowly, inexorably. The reflection, that thing, stepped through the hole with unnerving slowness. Its limbs were unnaturally long, too long, stretching at impossible angles as it moved. Its skin was like cracked porcelain, chipped and decayed, its mouth open in an inhuman grin filled with rows of jagged teeth. Ava tried to move, tried to scream, but her body betrayed her. Her legs wouldn't respond. She was frozen in place, her back pressed against the cold glass of the walls. The thing's eyes locked onto hers. There was no soul behind them, just black, endless voids. And then it spoke. "Do you see now?" The thing crooned in a voice that was both her own and something else, something darker. It was like hearing a reflection speak, but with the wrong words, the wrong tone. "You were always meant to be here." Ava's mind scrambled to make sense of its words, but it felt like a weight pressing against her skull, drowning her thoughts in its presence. The room swirled with distortion as if the walls and mirrors themselves were alive, aware. "This place," it whispered, moving closer, its smile growing wider, "is the reflection of everything. Everything you've ever wanted to forget." Ava's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a thunderous drum in the oppressive silence. "And now you've seen it all," the thing continued, its voice dripping with cold satisfaction. "The reflection is not just a shadow. It is the door to the truth, to the place beyond. The place where the walls between the real and the reflected no longer exist." The glass around her began to distort again, warping into something other, something alien. She could see herself, her reflection, multiplied and distorted, fractured across the walls. But it wasn't just her. There were others too. Shadows of people, of things that hadn't been there before. Figures that were too tall, too thin, their faces a blur of grotesque shapes, trapped in the reflections of the glass. And one by one, the figures began to step out of the mirrors. Ava screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the eerie, hollow hum that filled the room. They were coming for her. Each figure was a twisted, nightmarish version of something once human. Faces stretched, contorted, their eyes hollow and black, their mouths twisted in cruel smiles. They moved in unnatural, jerky motions, their bodies bent and stretched in impossible ways. The walls closed in. The creatures, those reflections, began to move toward her. Their eyes never left her. She could feel their hunger, their desperation to be free of the mirrors that had held them. They were all trapped, just like she was. They reached out for her, their hands skeletal, their claws too sharp. Ava's heart stopped. "You belong to us now," the thing in the center of the room said, its voice a hollow whisper that crawled beneath her skin. "You are part of the reflection." She was surrounded. The creatures were so close now that she could feel the chill of their breath on her skin, their fingers brushing against her arm, sending shockwaves of cold through her body. The room darkened even more, the light flickering and dying as the mirrors consumed all the light in the space. The walls stretched and bent, the reflection of the room multiplying, growing larger, consuming her vision. She felt herself being pulled toward the mirror, toward the darkness. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a trap, a prison, a place where the real and the reflected merged into something unrecognizable. The darkness swallowed her whole. For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no light. Just an overwhelming emptiness that pressed against her from all sides, suffocating her thoughts. Ava couldn't tell where her body ended and the void began. Her senses were scrambled, her mind spiraling into the silence. But then she felt it, movement. A subtle shift in the air, a tugging sensation deep inside her chest, as if something was pulling her back into reality. But it wasn't her reality. Not anymore. The room appeared again, but it wasn't the same. The mirrors were no longer smooth, reflective surfaces. They were fractured, cracked in places with jagged edges that gleamed like knives. The walls seemed to warp, stretching and bending in unnatural ways, as if they were trying to pull her into them. Ava's body felt numb, heavy. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. The room had taken her will, her agency, and trapped her in a prison of glass. "You thought you could leave," the thing's voice echoed, distorting in the emptiness. "You thought you could escape the reflection. But the glass is a prison. And you are its prisoner." Ava looked around, her head spinning. The reflections weren't just mirrors now. They were windows into other worlds, other realms, each one warped and twisted in its own horrific way. In one, she saw her own reflection, distorted and jagged, her face stretched into an inhuman grin, her eyes wide and wild. But there were others too. The figures that had followed her, those things, were watching her from inside the glass. Some were still grinning, their faces frozen in twisted smiles. Others had mouths stretched open, full of razor-sharp teeth, their eyes dark pits of nothingness. They were waiting. Ava's legs finally moved, though they felt sluggish, like they weren't entirely hers. She stumbled forward, her body unsteady, and reached out for the nearest mirror. Her reflection, that grotesque version of herself, mirrored her movements, but the moment she touched the glass, she felt it. The coldness, the emptiness. It seeped through her fingertips, draining her warmth, her strength. She pulled her hand back, horrified. "There is no escape," the voice whispered again. "You are part of us now. The mirror has claimed you. We are the reflection. We are the hunger." The walls around her began to pulse again, the room breathing, alive with a dark, hungry energy. Ava staggered backward, her pulse pounding in her ears. She could feel it now, the weight of the mirrors. The way they pressed against her, trapping her, suffocating her. She turned toward the center of the room where the thing, the reflection, stood. Its face was just like hers, yet so wrong. Its grin spread wider, impossibly wide, until its jaw seemed to unhinge. "You wanted to see the truth," it said softly, its voice dripping with malice. "Well, now you have." The creatures, the reflections, began to move again, crawling out of the glass, their long limbs stretching impossibly far. Their mouths opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. They were no longer confined to the mirrors. They were here, with her. The reflection of Ava took a step toward her, its smile never faltering. "You belong here," it hissed. "You are one of us now. Forever." Ava felt the pull of the glass again, as if the mirror itself was trying to drag her back into its depths. It was like a weight pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. But then something shifted. The reflection faltered. For the briefest moment, Ava saw a crack in the glass, a tiny fracture where the reflection was beginning to warp. The grin on the reflection's face faltered for just a heartbeat. The perfect smile twisted into something that resembled a grimace. And for that moment, Ava saw fear in its eyes. The reflection wasn't invincible. It was afraid. Ava didn't know why, but it was the first thing that had made sense since she had entered the room. The reflection was not all-powerful. There was a weakness. But before she could act, the room began to collapse around her. The glass shattered. The walls bent inward, pressing against her from every direction. The creatures, the reflections, rushed toward her, their mouths gaping wide, their claws reaching for her. Ava screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the overwhelming sound of cracking glass. And then, in the chaos, she saw it. A figure in the distance, standing in the midst of the shattered mirrors, bathed in a pale light. Its face was obscured, but Ava could see the glimmer of something familiar in its eyes. The shattered mirrors scattered across the floor like broken shards of the world, each reflecting. Twisted, contorted, the glass growing thicker as if the room itself was trying to swallow fragments of Ava's existence, her fractured memories and distorted versions of herself. Her. But through the chaos, through the overwhelming flood of creatures and reflections, she saw the figure. It stood in the center of the room, a silhouette bathed in a pale, eerie light that pulsed with a strange rhythm. Its form was obscured by shadows, but something about it was familiar, too familiar. Her heart skipped a beat, and for the first time since she'd entered this nightmare, she felt a flicker of recognition. It was her. No, it wasn't. Not quite. The figure's face was blurred, indistinct. But beneath the haze of distortion, Ava could see it clearly, herself. Yet, not like she had ever seen herself before. The eyes were different, hollow, filled with something that felt older, more ancient than anything she could comprehend. The reflection in the mirrors shifted as it stepped forward, revealing a crack in its own form, a broken piece of its existence that seemed to stretch out from the center of the room. Ava's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" Ava called out, her voice trembling. The figure's head tilted slightly, a faint, sad smile curving its lips. It didn't answer right away. Instead, it stepped forward, moving through the shattered glass as though it didn't exist in the same space anymore. The mirrors around it reflected it in 1,000 different forms, each one slightly different, as though the figure was constantly shifting, always changing, never truly solid. Then the figure spoke, its voice like the sound of broken glass scraping against stone. "I am the reflection you left behind," it said, its words slow and deliberate. "The one who was forgotten. The one who never escaped." Ava's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air like a haunting melody, but it took her a moment to piece them together. The reflection wasn't just a copy of her. It was something that had once been her, a part of her, a fragment of her soul, lost and abandoned in the mirror, left behind when she crossed through the doorway. The realization hit her like a wave, drowning her in a cold, sickening understanding. The reflection wasn't an enemy, it was her past. The part of herself she had locked away, hidden deep in the recesses of her mind, trying to forget the things she had done, the things she had become. This mirror, this place, it had trapped that piece of her. And now it had come back. "I've been waiting for you," the reflection continued, its smile widening, growing more twisted with each passing second. "Waiting to remind you of everything you tried to escape. Everything you thought you could bury." Ava's knees trembled and she tried to back away, but her body refused to obey her. The creatures, her own twisted reflections, closed in, their eyes glinting with malicious glee. "You can't run from yourself," the figure said, stepping closer, its presence overwhelming. "We are part of you. We always will be." The room grew darker, the air thick with the oppressive weight of truth. The walls of mirrors pressed in on her, the glass distorting the reality around her. She was caught in a web of her own making, tangled in a prison of reflections she had never meant to create. "No," Ava whispered, shaking her head. "I won't be like you. I won't become you." But the reflection only laughed, softly, cruelly. "You already have." The creatures began to close in, their mouths gaping open wider, their hands stretching toward her. The glass around her seemed to pulse with a sickening energy, pulling her deeper into the prison of mirrors. Ava's body trembled, and she looked back at the figure, the reflection. It wasn't just her past, it was everything she had tried to forget. Everything she had abandoned, buried beneath the surface. And now it was here, standing before her. "You can't escape the reflection," the figure whispered. "We are the echoes of your choices, the shadows of your regrets. And now, you belong to us." Ava closed her eyes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The reflections, the creatures, the twisted version of herself, they were closing in, surrounding her, suffocating her. The weight of the room pressed down on her chest, and for the first time, she realized what she had been running from all along. It wasn't the creatures. It wasn't the mirrors. It was herself. The reflection stepped forward, its hand reaching out, cold and sharp like glass. And with one final, crushing wave of darkness, Ava was consumed by the mirror. Ava's mind was a haze, her thoughts slipping away like water through her fingers. She could feel herself falling, plummeting into an abyss of darkness, her body weightless, suspended between realities. It was as though the very air had turned to glass, sharp and brittle, cutting into her skin with each fleeting moment. The reflections around her were no longer fragmented. They were whole, entire beings, each one an extension of her own twisted self. They whispered to her, murmuring in voices that were both alien and familiar, echoing inside her mind. "You can't escape the truth," they whispered. "You are us now. We are the reflection, and you belong to us." The room was gone. The mirrors, the glass walls, everything had melted away into nothingness, leaving her in an endless void. But the reflections, they remained, watching. And then, from the darkness, a voice called out, "Ava." The voice was soft, familiar, yet somehow distant. It made her heart stop. She turned, searching the emptiness for the source of the sound. Her breath caught in her throat. There, standing before her, was another figure. A woman. She was a mirror image of Ava, tall, dark-haired, pale. But unlike the twisted reflections, this woman seemed different. She wasn't contorted or grotesque. She was whole. "Who are you?" Ava whispered, her voice barely audible in the void. The woman smiled gently, her eyes soft but sad. "I'm the you you've forgotten," she replied. Ava's mind spun. The you've forgotten. The word struck deep within her, resonating in a way that she couldn't fully grasp. She opened her mouth to speak, but the woman raised her hand, silencing her. "It's all right," the woman said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. "You'll understand soon enough. But first, you need to face the truth." The reflection before her shimmered, fading and reappearing like a fleeting memory, the woman's face blurring and shifting into something that looked disturbingly like the creatures Ava had seen in the mirrors. The dark, hollow eyes, the gaping mouths. Ava took a step back, her pulse quickening. "Don't be afraid," the woman said softly, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "This is who you are now. This is the reflection you've denied. The part of yourself that was always here, waiting." Twisted, contorted, the glass growing thicker as if the room itself was trying to swallow fragments of Ava's existence. her fractured memories and distorted versions of herself. But through the chaos, through the overwhelming flood of creatures and reflections, she saw the figure. It stood in the center of the room, a silhouette bathed in a pale, eerie light that pulsed with a strange rhythm. Its form was obscured by shadows, but something about it was familiar, too familiar. Her heart skipped a beat, and for the first time since she'd entered this nightmare, she felt a flicker of recognition. It was her. No, it wasn't. Not quite. The figure's face was blurred, indistinct. But beneath the haze of distortion, Ava could see it clearly, herself. Yet not like she had ever seen herself before. The eyes were different, hollow, filled with something that felt older, more ancient than anything she could comprehend. The reflection in the mirror shifted as it stepped forward, revealing a crack in its own form, a broken piece of its existence that seemed to stretch out from the center of the room. Ava's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" Ava called out, her voice trembling. The figure's head tilted slightly, a faint, sad smile curving its lips. It didn't answer right away. Instead, it stepped forward, moving through the shattered glass as though it didn't exist in the same space anymore. The mirrors around it reflected it in 1,000 different forms, each one slightly different, as though the figure was constantly shifting, always changing, never truly solid. Then the figure spoke, its voice like the sound of broken glass scraping against stone. "I am the reflection you left behind," it said, its words slow and deliberate. "The one who was forgotten. The one who never escaped." Ava's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air like a haunting melody, but it took her a moment to piece them together. The reflection wasn't just a copy of her. It was something that had once been her. A part of her. A fragment of her soul, lost and abandoned in the mirror, left behind when she crossed through the doorway. The realization hit her like a wave, drowning her in a cold, sickening understanding. The reflection wasn't an enemy, it was her past. The part of herself she had locked away, hidden deep in the recesses of her mind, trying to forget the things she had done, the things she had become. This mirror, this place, it had trapped that piece of her. And now it had come back. "I've been waiting for you," the reflection continued, its smile widening, growing more twisted with each passing second. "Waiting to remind you of everything you tried to escape. Everything you thought you could bury." Ava's knees trembled and she tried to back away, but her body refused to obey her. The creatures, her own twisted reflections, closed in, their eyes glinting with malicious glee. "You can't run from yourself," the figure said, stepping closer, its presence overwhelming. "We are part of you. We always will be." The room grew darker, the air thick with the oppressive weight of truth. The walls of mirrors pressed in on her, the glass distorting the reality around her. She was caught in a web of her own making, tangled in a prison of reflections she had never meant to create. "No," Ava whispered, shaking her head. "I won't be like you. I won't become you." But the reflection only laughed, softly, cruelly. "You already have." The creatures began to close in, their mouths gaping open wider, their hands stretching toward her. The glass around her seemed to pulse with a sickening energy, pulling her deeper into the prison of mirrors. Ava's body trembled, and she looked back at the figure, the reflection. It wasn't just her past, it was everything she had tried to forget. Everything she had abandoned, buried beneath the surface. And now it was here, standing before her. "You can't escape the reflection," the figure whispered. "We are the echoes of your choices, the shadows of your regrets. And now, you belong to us." Ava closed her eyes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The reflections, the creatures, the twisted version of herself, they were closing in, surrounding her, suffocating her. The weight of the room pressed down on her chest, and for the first time, she realized what she had been running from all along. It wasn't the creatures. It wasn't the mirrors. It was herself. The reflection stepped forward, its hand reaching out, cold and sharp like glass. And with one final, crushing wave of darkness, Ava was consumed by the mirror. Ava's mind was a haze, her thoughts slipping away like water through her fingers. She could feel herself falling, plummeting into an abyss of darkness, her body weightless, suspended between realities. It was as though the very air had turned to glass, sharp and brittle, cutting into her skin with each fleeting moment. The reflections around her were no longer fragmented. They were whole, entire beings, each one an extension of her own twisted self. They whispered to her, murmuring in voices that were both alien and familiar, echoing inside her mind. "You can't escape the truth," they whispered. "You are us now. We are the reflection, and you belong to us." The room was gone. The mirrors, the glass walls, everything had melted away into nothingness, leaving her in an endless void. But the reflections, they remained, watching. And then, from the darkness, a voice called out, "Ava." The voice was soft, familiar, yet somehow distant. It made her heart stop. She turned, searching the emptiness for the source of the sound. Her breath caught in her throat. There, standing before her, was another figure. A woman. She was a mirror image of Ava, tall, dark-haired, pale. But unlike the twisted reflections, this woman seemed different. She wasn't contorted or grotesque. She was whole. "Who are you?" Ava whispered, her voice barely audible in the void. The woman smiled gently, her eyes soft but sad. "I'm the you you've forgotten," she replied. Ava's mind spun. The you forgotten. The word struck deep within her, resonating in a way that she couldn't fully grasp. She opened her mouth to speak, but the woman raised her hand, silencing her. "It's all right," the woman said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. "You'll understand soon enough. But first, you need to face the truth." The reflection before her shimmered, fading and reappearing like a fleeting memory, the woman's face blurring and shifting into something that looked disturbingly like the creatures Ava had seen in the mirrors. The dark, hollow eyes, the gaping mouths. Ava took a step back, her pulse quickening. "Don't be afraid," the woman said softly, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "This is who you are now. This is the reflection you've denied. The part of yourself that was always here, waiting." Ava's hands trembled as she clutched at her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The woman's words were suffocating, each one sinking into her skin like ice. The truth was too much to bear, too much to process. "No," Ava whispered, shaking her head, unable to tear her gaze away from the woman before her. I'm not like them. I'm not like you." The woman's smile faded, her eyes darkening. "You are like me. You are like all of us. The reflections are you and you are them. You cannot escape what you are. You cannot escape yourself." The world around Ava began to distort again, the air swirling with dark energy, the reflections shifting and multiplying, until they were everywhere. They pressed in on her from all sides, their eyes following her, their hands reaching out, eager to pull her back into the mirrors. Ava stumbled backward, but her feet couldn't find solid ground. She was falling deeper into the dark abyss. Her body was weightless, caught in the pull of the reflection, trapped in the endless void between realities. "No!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. "I don't want this." The woman, her reflection, reached out to her, her eyes soft but unyielding. "You don't have a choice, Ava," she said, her voice filled with sorrow. "You're already part of us. You've always been." Ava felt a strange sensation in her chest, a coldness creeping through her body. Her hands went numb, her thoughts slow and distant, as though the reflection was invading her very essence. "You will never leave," the woman whispered, her voice growing distant, fading into the darkness. "We are the reflection. And you are ours." The abyss swallowed Ava whole, her body pulled deeper into the void. She felt herself losing grip on reality, the world around her warping, the reflections merging into one indistinguishable mass of shadows and light. And then there was nothing. Ava awoke in a place that was both nowhere and everywhere. The void had swallowed her, but it had not consumed her entirely. She floated in a space between realities, suspended in the remnants of shattered glass and fractured reflections. Around her, the broken pieces of mirrors drifted like stars in a darkened sky. Each shard reflected a different version of herself, some familiar, some distorted, all haunting. She reached out, her fingers brushing against one of the shards. The reflection that stared back at her was not her own. It was the twisted version, the one she had seen in the reflection room. The one with the hollow eyes and the gaping mouth. Ava recoiled, but the shard remained, its reflection mocking her. "You cannot escape," a voice whispered from the darkness. It was the voice of the reflection, the one who had claimed her. "You are me," it continued, "and I am you." Ava's heart raced. The truth was undeniable. She had been running from herself, from the darkness within her that she had tried to bury. But now there was nowhere left to hide. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The shattered pieces of mirrors swirled around her, their reflections merging into a single image, a reflection of herself, whole and unbroken. She reached out, her hand trembling. As her fingers touched the surface of the mirror, she felt a surge of energy, a rush of memories, emotions, and truths long suppressed. The reflection before her shifted, its features blurring and reforming. It was no longer twisted or monstrous. It was her, all of her. The light and the dark, the strength and the weakness, the beauty and the scars. Ava smiled, tears streaming down her face. She had faced the darkness within her and had embraced it. She was no longer a prisoner of the reflection room. She was free. Don't forget to like and subscribe and watch out for the next.